So Greg Jarvis is the CEO of Bluelab. He'll be on my left, followed by Richard Doohan, who's the head of technology strategy at LIC Automation. Colin Brown, the founding director at TracMap. I hope I'm not butchering your names or the names of the companies, so apologize in advance. Bruce Moeller, CEO of AquaSpy, and Dr. Michael Dowgert, VP of Sales and Marketing at CropX. Please welcome our panelists. Everybody stretched out? All right, let's get started. So welcome. Wanted to start the let me open my notes here. Start the panel discussion on the topic. The topic of our conversation today is going to be how IoT is going to enable food production improvement of about 70% over the next 30 to 50 years. And that's the goal that we need to achieve as a human species across the globe. And of course, the IoT folks are gung-ho about achieving that goal. So that's our conversation. And what we'd like to do is spend some time in conversation, but I'd also like to invite all of you to ask questions in the last 5 to 10 minutes of our conversation. So with that, we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. What I'd like to do is get started with everybody providing a brief introduction to themselves, a little bit about their companies, real short, and then we'll come to the next slide, starting with you, Greg.
Okay, hopefully the mic's working. Good. Okay, so our company is Bluelab. We have been in the measurement and control business probably best part of 30 years. And I guess from our point of view, what we see is a continual development of this sensor technology and, more importantly, the information that it actually provides to the grower in a situation where they can make good decisions from that information. I think that the real challenge is connecting the data back to the information to make that decision-making easy. I think something that's similar to the rest of the world is that there are less people around who have the horticultural or agronomic training. So again, we've got to be able to support the decision-making process by giving them the answers that they may not know because they haven't done, an ag science degree or have got a really good background in horticulture, but they have a really good background in business management.
Great, thanks, Greg. Richard?
Hello, everyone. So our company, LIC Automation, operates in the space of herd management for dairy cows, particularly in the pasture environment. And if we talk about this topic, our key technologies disrupt the lab-based supply chain for animal evaluation. So rather than taking a sample of milk, sending it to the lab, processing it, giving the data back to the farmer to then act on the animal, we measure all those parameters cow side, and so we close the loop. So it's animal, farmer, and back to the animal. So ideally, we're helping you make your animals better, faster, and more representative of the system they're operating in. And so if we look at this topic and trying to increase production, the dairy industry at the moment would argue maybe there's an oversupply with the payouts, but going forward it's got to be about efficiency, and we operate in the genetic efficiency space.
Okay, great. And we're going to talk about a lot of the topics, so I'd like the introductions to be quick so we can get to the topics and the meat. Not to be unfair to the rest of the three panelists over there. Colin?
Yes, TracMap is the largest agricultural GPS business in New Zealand. We don't actually use sensors too much, but we are very interested in the output from sensors and smart things because our customers turn around and use that information to go and do things. So we go and put fertiliser on farms and spray and all that kind of stuff, or our customers do. We don't. So that's what we do.
I'm Bruce Moeller. I'm the CEO of AquaSpy. We put sensors in the ground to monitor how the roots are going to interact with what the moisture and the nutrients are in the soil. And my goal here today and for the rest of my life is to convince you that the world is not flat.
Hello, I'm Michael Dowgert. I work for CropX. We're a startup, and we're involved in soil sensing and basically a integrated solution that includes both hardware and cloud-based software.
Great, thank you. So the first question I'd like to put to our panel, and again, I'd like to go sort of round robin, if you will, is really set the tone with your vision. Not what you're doing today or your day-to-day problems. We'll come to that. But as you look out and in your vision, how do you see IoT in general help the industry with food production? Broadly speaking, that's why you're in this business, and share some of your vision elements with us. Greg?
Okay, I think from our point of view, and what I alluded to initially is around decision making, and I think farmers, growers, they're faced with a lot of complexity in terms of their decision making, and as I said before, sometimes the people who are doing those jobs don't have all the background in terms of all of the information that they really need to make good decisions. So I think where IoT and sensing can come in is to really simplify the processes around which they go through to make good decisions. And I think it's very much a case of just delivering the farmer the go or no go decision, rather than having to take a number, interpret that number, work out what it is they then need to do with it to make the optimum decision for their property. So that's how I see it.
Richard?
So I guess the key feature for us is milk production is a full supply chain, eating grass, walking, and being milked. Where we observe and we get excited about the technologies that are coming is the miniaturization, the low power, and the ability to perhaps ultimately end up with an on-cow platform which is commercially feasible in a pasture environment, slightly different to a barn environment, but deploying the information out remotely and putting it on something that moves.
Yeah, for me, I get excited, and I don't see a problem with being able to feed the world and produce that extra 70% of food. Like, if you think at what we were doing in terms of food production, our grandfathers were producing 30, 40 years ago, and what they thought was capped out at producing 80 bushels per acre or whatever it might be, and compare with what we're doing today, they couldn't foresee what sort of tools were going to enable them to do 160 bushels when their grandfather was only doing 80 bushels because of the genetics and the water and all the other things. And we can't foresee what we're going to be doing to produce that extra 70% now, just like they couldn't foresee it 40 years ago. But I get excited because commercial reality will drive it, and it'll happen.
From my perspective on the Internet of Things, I see a lot of it confuses and freezes the farmer because there's so much out there and he hears so much and everybody promises that the yield is going to double or quintuple or whatever it's going to do. And ultimately it eventually does, but there are conflicting signals that go on where one system reports you should do this and another reports you should do that. So we've got a little over 500,000 acres under management right now. We doubled last year, and we're already ahead of that pace this year. And what we're finding, and this alludes to the world is not flat, it's vertical. And it's as simple as what we're finding when we correlate the data, is that if this is the root, and this is the zone that the root is active in, where it's looking to forage, you can imagine if you were looking to forage and you were sucking on a straw and there was nothing in that zone, you would not be able to take nutrients into your body, and plants are made 80 to 90% of water, so if it's not there, it can't take it in. Now, your life cycle, if you guys reach crops, is about 90, 100 days in most cases, so if many of those days you can't drink from having nutrients there, obviously you can stay alive, but you're not going to get big and fat. If we want to get you big and fat, we just simply match your active root zone with the energy, the nutrients that are in that layer of the earth. And as long as that gas tank is full, when that root is there to forage it, we're seeing between an 11 and a 35% increase in yield. And that's on right now I said a little over 500,000 acres and several thousand fields. So we think that we can definitely keep up with the increase that is necessary if we can convince you that one of the most salient things you need to pay attention to is that the world is vertical, not flat.
Michael, what's your take? What's your
Okay,
vision?
so my vision, I think, I'm not sure, I'm going to say, okay, so the vision of CropX is to really make the soil visible, become the Internet of soil. Frankly, when you talk about the Internet of Things, people are not getting very much data right now from the soil. Only 10% of US farmers use moisture sensors to make irrigation decisions. And so our goal is to actually make it simple and make it inexpensive enough that you're not talking about deploying a few sensors, but you're deploying thousands and thousands of sensors. And not just for water, but for nutrients, maybe for temperature. You might even be able to look for diseases. So really, to really create the data that'll be needed for this data-driven kind of expansion.
So just a follow-up question on that, particularly for Bruce and Michael, but feel free, all the panelists, to chime in. Is the vision then that sort of every tree, every plant has some sensing element, either a sensor or some direct or indirect way of sensing it, such that that information is ubiquitously available for then decision-making, which, Greg, you brought up earlier as your vision. Is that the vision, or is it the vision that it's going to be device-based or a kind of a specific soil versus plant versus tree, tree versus the leaf, etc. Can you comment a little bit about do you see sensors on every plant? I mean, there's certainly people who are talking about, machines for every plant. What is your vision? Just to follow up on that same thing, if you could start on the other side and move this way. Yeah.
So that's actually an interesting vision. I can't actually see that far ahead myself. So I'm
not trying to put words in your mouth. I was just trying to...
if you could put one, every 10 acres, that would be kind of magic, honestly, So, but I could see where there could be individual, your follow-up about, whether or not you need, these things are disjointed or not disjointed, and we'll discuss this more, but I think you have to solve problems that farmers have. You can't make them up. They're in business, they have to make money, and you have to solve problems that help them make money, and that's how you build commercials. So it's gonna really grow in that way. How do you fix an economic problem? Like actually the problem you brought up in terms of yield and water. This is a very specific problem. It's something that needs fixing.
Bruce, what's your take on it?
Well, I can see I'm going to have my work cut out for me with both you and probably the rest of the room, because we're still talking in horizontal terms, like 10 acres or how many acres. It isn't about how many horizontal acres it is. It's about the depth of those acres and where the active root zone is within those. And in our case, we don't care what crop it is or what soil type it is, because we measure automatically what's the holding capacity of that layer of earth. And the earth was made in layers, so it's not all homogeneous. You can't pre-describe that if it's silty loam or sand or clay, it's going to react this way. We let the plant tell us. So yesterday was 420. I don't know if we have any hippies in here, but I saw on Hippie Hill there was 100,000 people or some crazy thing like that. I wish we had that many farmers to care about this as we did people who liked weed. If I could get that many people to understand, like in the Doonesbury comics, the Zonker Harris, where he talks to the plants, well, we're having the plant talk to us. We put a cell phone down there effectively, and we let it tell us what it likes and what it doesn't like, and then you can react accordingly. So no, I don't see it on a per acre basis. I see it on a per depth or layer of zone of earth basis, and I don't see one per plant, although we've got it down to about 40 cents an acre. Although I guess I should start pricing it in layers of depth as well.
Colin?
If we come back to the question, it'll be needs driven. like in some cases, the value of the crop will be such that, yes, you will actually have sensors maybe on every tree, maybe the sensors, maybe, some of the things we saw a couple of days ago about understanding what actually goes inside the tissues of and how the zoum and phloem, I got the words wrong, but don't worry about that, those tubes inside the vines actually all connect and everything else. It'll be needs-based, and we can't yet foresee some of the technologies that will become available, will get read into those things that will enable it to fit whatever is commercially sensible.
Richard?
So I think you have a great vision that if the cost can come down or the revenue models work to do that, but just having a sensor on every plant isn't going to be the solution. It's how you present that data. So it's either an automated response from a agricultural robot, or it's presenting a dashboard that makes decisions quickly for the farmer. That's going to be key.
I really agree with Colin, and I think it's a combination of cost and value. So as the cost comes down and the value of to the farmer goes up, then obviously they will want to deploy more sensors. So it really does come down to that commercial balance. And I think what we have seen is that the cost of sensing generally is coming down, and therefore things that people wouldn't do many years ago are now becoming a lot more achievable. So I think whether it gets to every plant, I think that's really going to be crop dependent.
Great. That actually is a nice segue into the next question I was going to ask the panel, which is, let's talk about economics, because I think when anybody talks about IoT, economics, particularly from farmers, is a very, very important thing. And that's a large part of the decision matrix that they have. I mean, a lot of them are forward-thinking, but they also need to manage their money. So from your lens, from your company's perspective, and what would be really great is if you could tie it to an example to make it real, where your company implemented X at a particular farmer, and X cost this much and yielded that much. Some sort of a case study briefly, because we got 5 of you and we have only 15 minutes left. But I really wanted to hit on that because that's a key issue that I hear a lot from farmers who, are eager to look at technology, but always struggle with the economics. And sometimes they don't even know if it's too low or too high or whether it's right. And it's just one of those things that everybody wants. So, Greg.
Okay, well, we're involved in sort of controlled environment growing and greenhouse growing. And one of the things that we've known for a long time is around pH control. And despite, that knowledge being out there, there's still a lot of growers who don't actually believe terribly in pH control. So in our space, you'll have anything from people who use a piece of paper to get a litmus test on pH, right through to people who use a controller to actually control that. So one of the things I guess we had to do was really demonstrate to growers that pH control was a good thing. So we commissioned some work from Horticultural Research Station to actually visually show the growers the difference between a crop that is controlled in terms of pH versus one that isn't. And I guess that's the ability to then take the difference in the crop yield and actually convert that into a number, which actually says, well, because you've put this in, you can actually develop a better product and give you a better return on your investment.
So let's talk about the cost of that product and the return. So in your case, so I'm the farmer, you're pitching me, what's it cost to implement a pH control, and what was the benefit that they got?
Well, or
future benefit.
Yeah, I think that work's still ongoing, but we're talking about for an average grower be a deployment of control that is in maybe a few $1,000s, but the returns are in the tens and maybe up to the $50,000-$60,000, and that's on a per. Well, no, see, we don't do per acre. That would be so. This is really on
per year.
Well, yeah, I would say definitely on an annual basis. So for someone who is involved in that, it's just a matter of improving the profit on the same level of inputs. And that's, I think, the case, is if you can get more value out of the same level of inputs, then your profitability goes up. So
You're looking at like break even in a year, 2x, 3x, 10x, 100x. What are you thinking about?
I'm probably thinking, in reality, probably somewhere between 6 months to a year.
Got it.
Cool. All right. So a good study for us is Estrous Detection. In the US or in Europe, where you've got barns, you measure cows by open days. We calve and mate all our cows at the same time within a 6 to 8 week period. It's a little bit unique. It's related to our geography. So what we do is we provide a technology which helps you detect that your cows are on heat at the right time. And by doing this, what this gets you past is labour units who are unskilled, who are poor. So every time you miss an estrous cycle, that's 21 days of milk, which you can't capture at the other end once that cow calves. So I don't have the dollar figures, but it's quite tangible, that 21 days of milk. And then what we can bring in with an automated system is you no longer need to use bulls for natural mating. So you now don't have bulls to lease or to manage on your farm. If they're on your farm, they consume grass, so the productivity goes down. And then a further step we can do is take your artificial insemination from being 6 to 8 weeks to pushing it out to 10 or 12, where you would use natural mating, and use some technology like short gestation semen. So these are calves that arrive about 11 days earlier than a normal dairy calf. And that makes life easier and increases productivity.
So numbers. What is the typical cost to implement per calf or whatever, and what is the return on investment in a year?
Yes, I don't know the exact figures, and it depends on your farm and your operating system. But
what's the range? Any rough idea?
I mean, your return on investment is within 2 years, so 2 seasons for us. Your running costs are low, a few dollars per cow to achieve this, but the end result is quite tangible. So, an extra 21 days of milk. You don't have bulls on your farm. You don't.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Colin?
Okay, a real simple example. Kagome International in Australia grow 250,000 tonne of tomatoes a year. They wanted to start capturing where they were harvesting their tomatoes from and put load cells across all their harvesters and picking that data up so that they could actually do yield maps, and so they could do traceability of where bins were coming from, so they could trace it back through for some of the reasons that the previous panel talked about in terms of traceability and everything else. One of the side benefits that came out of it is they suddenly realised they actually were picking up the yields of tomatoes coming in off the crops 4 hours earlier, because of what they used to rely on is when the trucks turned up to tip the tomatoes off, and sometimes if they're yielding heavier, they can't take the tomatoes, and because the factories can't cope with the processing. Or at other times, the fields are yielding under, and they actually should have carried on harvesting longer, so they have to shut down and send the workers home early. So $300,000 to put that across their system, and I got told the other day that their savings are about $10 million a year.
That's tangible.
That's reasonably tangible. They're reasonably happy.
Bruce?
In our case, we enforce using an ROI calculator when we sell to somebody in the first place. So the value proposition, and it's on our website, you can try it, but the value proposition that you would go through when you're selling to somebody is how much water do you think you'll save if you knew where the active root zone is versus what you're putting on, and most people will save a turn or two on the pivot, as they'll say, at an acre inch. Then there's chemicals not leaching through, and you can save 5, 10, 15, 20% from not leaching through the chemicals. To me, those are byproducts. It's really about making sure that you're getting, again, the right amount of the nutrient in the right depth at the right zone at the right time, and you get a yield increase from that. And in that case, anywhere from 0.5% on more than pays for the system multiple times back. So lots of case studies on our website if you're interested in specifics, but one, since you asked, is Orange Co. They have orange groves, and they have our systems network through their entire orange grove. They spend $28,000 a year for the total system, and that covers everything. And they're saving $287,000. And what I will tell you about that is, what's interesting to me coming from other industries is, even when you have that and you have the case studies and you can point next door, somebody will say, yeah, that's Jerry's, but I got different soil over here, and my oranges don't get sold to Walmart, they get sold to Costco. And so each guy needs to prove it to himself, and you have an adoption cycle, which is the guy will try 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 the first year, and then if he sees indeed that we weren't lying, then he might double or triple it the next year, and then the third year, then he might go to quadruple or quintuple or fully roll it out. It just takes time, and these guys are the ultimate entrepreneurs. They're literally betting the farm, so it's going to take time. That's just the way it is.
Thank you. And just quickly, those numbers you quoted, are they on an annual basis, the 28 and...
Those are annual, yes.
Okay, got it. Michael?
Right. So we, and again, as Bruce said, it all depends on the crop. And I would say that you have to be careful when you try to move models between crops. They don't actually move very well between crops. You have to understand the expenses and everything else. So we use corn as an example. Actually, corn was our target crop. It's not the cheapest crop, but it's a pretty inexpensive commodity crop. An average corn farmer over the last 20 years nets about $100 to $200 an acre. That's their net, and with an investment of about $3,000 or more an acre. Our cost is $4 an acre. And I apologize about the depth, but because there is a depth, but there's also a spatial issue. In other words, soils vary over a field. It's not unusual for a field to have 4 or 5 different soils. So our cost is $4 an acre, and that's having a sensor every 60 acres. The yield increase somewhere, okay, obviously you could have no yield increase if you're not, depending on how you're managing, but people who have managed their water pretty well generally get something between 5 and 15% yield increase, which, on a corn crop is worth about $15 an acre or so.
Fantastic. I appreciate those specifics, because even though they are small, it matters. So 2 more questions, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. First is on challenges, and let's we just got shown the sign. We got 15 minutes, so we got to keep some questions time for the audience. Let's talk about challenges first, and we've all gone through this cycle of Bruce, you mentioned the slow adoption cycle. That's clearly something everybody resonates with. But briefly, if you could just highlight some of the key challenges, but also maybe one idea that you might have to overcome that, so that it becomes something everybody could chew on. That would be really great. Greg?
Okay, well,
challenges for your business.
Okay, well, I was going to agree that the slow adoption cycle, because even when the evidence is clearly in front of people, it still takes a long time for people to pick up and actually do something with that information. And so I think from our point of view, what we try to engage in is with customer education. And I think that, so we try and make sure that the customer understands what they're trying to achieve and how we can help that, whether it's our technology or somebody else's. The key thing is that the more that the end customer is educated about the benefits, then the more they're likely to come to the party. And even though that may take a while, that to me is very much an ongoing process.
Fantastic.
So for us around if we look at just Internet of Things and some challenges there, is we see some really great technology, but how do we drive it? How do we provide power to it? How do we make it cost effective to the client at that, whatever that power supply needs to be? And then playing into that is connectivity. If we start to move away from our traditional spot, being the dairy parlour, how do we connect that information? And we talk about things like 4G, 5G, mobile systems, but geography means that they don't work everywhere. We have dead zones. So how do we get that information back? That's one big key challenge for us.
Got it. Colin?
Yeah. I suppose I take a slightly different view in that I see the challenge as no different to the challenge that existed ever since we started to try and farm smart and introduce technology. There was a technology lag. It's a reality of it. What is the challenge that's probably more apparent now is the speed of the change and trying to keep up with it. And it's going to be, we hasn't talked about it here, but you saw some examples of that big data and the collection of everything else. The challenge is trying to have agriculturalists involved sufficiently to ensure that the smart guys building the smart systems actually understand to build systems. And in the previous panel, the comment was made about robots and sensors, and I've seen them, and you guys will have all seen, you don't understand putting a light sensor on something, but if it's in a dusty environment, it just doesn't work. And so the challenge is, I think, getting agriculturalists involved and sufficiently to make sure they try and get it right as quick as they can.
Excellent. Bruce, you already went with your challenge, but if there's another one, that would be great. And a solution, please.
Yeah. So we have a challenge and a vision as well. So part of the reason the adoption is slow is for all of us is because when you're growing crops, it's a live entity. It has DNA and it has obviously a nature and a nurture aspect to it. So what we want to do is come forward with a system that's much like your FICO score. Now, I'm learning, since I have a lot of foreign investors, people don't know what a FICO score is. Do you all know what a FICO score is, and do you know what yours is? So a FICO score is your credit score. It's how you pay your bills and how well you're doing and so forth. I want to do the same thing for ag. I want to call it the YES score, Yield Efficiency Score. So that's your FICO score. So the first thing you have to do to convince people that it wasn't an accident and that Jerry's oranges were just as good as Joe's oranges for a reason, you have to separate nature from nurture. Nature is nature. It's the seed DNA, it's the sun, it's the growing degree days, it's all that stuff. Separate that, we can't control it, nothing we can do about it. But on the nurture side of things, we can do that. We can measure your behavior just as a consumer on how you pay your bills and what credit you run up. If you're a grower, you can do behavioral things that make a good practice to get the best yield you can get within the constraints of nature. So we've come up with a thing called the YES score. We did it in our past environment with driving scores. So if you guys have variable driving scores and you pay insurance, pay as you drive, well, we did that. We did it from scratch. I want to do it here. That's the vision. That's what we want to do, and we want to do that so there's a tangible, scientific way for a grower to know that he's done everything he can to get the best yield. And we decrement him just like your FICO score. We decrement you for doing dumb things, and we give you increments for things that are good. So that's the challenge. That's the vision. It'll take me the rest of my life, but that's what we'd like to do.
All right, Michael.
Okay, so I'll just take kind of a little bit different tack on the challenge. So in my world, the challenge is that the farming is one of the most complex businesses. And by the way, these are all businessmen. I think this is something we can't forget, is that, and frankly, by the way, most of them have been in business more than 100 years, okay? So how many people know businesses who have been in business 100 years, okay? They've been in business 100 years because they do things a certain way. They're conservative, they understand that they are betting the farm, and they don't bet the farm. They're smart enough not to do that, okay? So and the thing is that they're thinking about so many different things. In fact, in my mind, and I'll go back to a corn farmer, he spends, I would say, half his time thinking about how is he going to market his crop. Does he need to buy futures? Does he need to pre-sell his crop? Does he need to go on the spot market because he thinks the market's going to go up at the end of the year? And he spends a lot of time. He spends about 5% of his mental energy thinking about his crop. He hires people to think about his crop, smart people and stuff. He doesn't spend. So our challenge is to actually make sure that we're only using a fraction of that percent of his mental energy, because he's got to use it for other things. So he has to be able to look at something and understand in a very short period of time, seconds, I need to do something, I don't need to do something. And that's really, to me, is the biggest challenge.
Fantastic. Okay, so last question from me, and then we'll open it up to the audience. What's your dream? A previous panel also asked the same question, so I'll repeat it. It's not the same as your company's vision. The dream is why you're doing what you're doing, and why you're doing something pretty hard at the early stages of its adoption. And we all know of the challenges. We just talked about it. So clearly there must be something that, excites you when you wake up at night, and when you go to bed, you think about the next day. So what is your dream? Why are you in it? What do you see changing, and sort of what keeps you going? So, Greg?
Okay, from our experience, I mean, a lot of people come into greenhouse growing, with a lot of ambition. Maybe they want to do that as a lifestyle, and over time, some of them get disillusioned and they fail. And I think, my dream would be that those people can continue to grow and prosper rather than sort of become disillusioned with the whole nature of the business. And so for us, we're all about supporting that to make sure that things that they do that might be dumb don't cost them their business. And I think that's, and also keeps their level of energy up and also their enjoyment. Because I think, when the whole thing becomes a drag, it's like any job, it's not so easy for a grower or farmer to just go, well, I'm going to change jobs now because I hate this job. They're kind of in it for life. So, if we can make that easier for them and make it more enjoyable, then that certainly would be a great outcome.
Great. Richard?
I think our dream is fairly simple. It's to really let you look after your animals on the farm in real time. So creating a step change from the lab, from a expertise point of view, and bring it right there and then where you can see it and you can act on it, and give you peace of mind and make your animals happy and healthy.
Colin?
I'll just quote an example of how I would see it starting to fall together. You've got a ranch growing grapes somewhere up the Napa Valley, and there's a drone sitting there, and every 3 days it checks the weather, checks the sunlight, takes off, flies around, scans everything, comes back, docks back down, compares it with the images it's collected last time, detects some variations are occurring in a corner, and throws up those insights as a warning to someone on their cell phone. They go in and check, and there's some biomarkers that are actually being bred into those plants that are actually indicating that they've got some fungal disease. And so then one of the robots we heard around before goes trudging out there and starts plucking individual fungal things off those leaves so that you don't even have to use chemicals. That's the sort of thing I can see us going if you can start combining all these things together. And there'll be multitudes of those type of examples.
Bruce?
My dream would be able to get a full night's sleep at night, the whole night through, without waking up and worrying about the business. And our stuff works. It's proven. It's scientific. It's all about adoption. And we're always worrying about how can we convince people to adopt this. It will achieve the goal that you started this panel on, which is to increase the food production. It's what needs to be happen from all of us. I mean, any technology that's going to actually add to that yield increase, that productivity, needs to be adopted in ag, and it needs to be done before people run out of patience and run out of money. So, that's really my dream, is to stay alive.
Michael?
All right, so I think, my dream, it actually echoes Bruce's a little bit. My dream is to make farming less risky for farmers. Farming is very risky, and you do that by taking out some of the variables. I think it's not a very necessarily ambitious dream, but I think it's a dream that would, that overall helps. And when you talk about feeding the world, because we didn't really talk a little bit, but, I firmly believe all that starts with the farmers. I agree. We have no trouble feeding. We won't have any trouble feeding the world. You just have to look to the people who do it. They know how to do it, actually. They already know how to do it. They could do it right now if they had to. It's a question of, can they get paid for it? And that would be my second dream, is that to actually make sure that they get paid for the hard effort they put in.
Fantastic. Okay, so with that, I'll open the floor to questions from the audience. Yes, sir. Oh, well, I'm here to moderate the panel, but we are a big data provider platform for taking inputs, like a lot of the sensor inputs, and providing decision support. But enough about me. I really want to focus on the panelists. Yep.
On that note, I'd be curious to hear what people think about interoperability. Clearly, there's some value in combining the sensor data with other data layers on the field, the ability to unlock different insights. How do you guys see your systems interacting with others in the ag ecosystem?
Great question. Pretty clear. Go ahead, Colin.
It will happen because guys like Summer and others will end up putting systems in place that will happen. Like sensors and Internet of Things is only part of the solution, isn't it? Like it's actually, ultimately, you're using sensors to provide smart people with insights for them to make better decisions, which then will get implemented. So it's a complex question, and but it will get solved incrementally by smart people applying themselves to individual problems driven commercially.
Greg?
Yeah, I think one of the things that needs to be overcome is probably an issue of ego, in that, you know, when you talk about, people always want to have their product at the center of the Internet of Things, and that they feel that everything else is peripheral to them. And I think it's a matter of working out how you can be at different times both in the center but also on the fringes as well. And there needs to be that ability to form more of a web rather than sort of say that, you know, your product is, and I think that is possibly something that is stopping perhaps the adoption to the extent where there's a little bit of concern about, well, do I open up the API and what does that do to me, and does that mean I get moved out of the value chain? So it's a matter of assessing where your product, where your service sits in the value chain, and where you can realistically participate and help be part of the solution.
Anybody else? Bruce?
I actually do not believe in the interoperability as a valid factor for a while, and the reason is economic. We just talked about how hard it is to get adoption and how everybody claims that their stuff is the best, and how whether it's ego or whether it's you really believe that something's going to drive the yield. I've seen a couple guys already in the industry put everything together under a dashboard. So basically, you're throwing the kitchen sink at the grower, and he can't afford the kitchen sink. So what's really going to wind up happening is whatever it is that actually is the most salient driver of yield for him, that's what's going to survive. And then incrementally, things that add to that and supplement it and are priced right will get put together. But if you throw it all together in a dashboard now, A, it's going to be confusing, B, it won't be effective, and C, the guy can't afford it.
Colin?
I disagree, actually.
Now we're talking.
Right. I actually have a different view on that. I think that interoperability is coming, and it's coming fast. And you see examples where, you know, John Deere tried to keep their systems in its own little shell, and just recently they realised they can't. And Trimble are the same. We're actually starting to see people recognising the point that was made, that you have to share with others and specialise in where you're good. And people will choose the bits out of that interoperability. Once it's easy to get at, it's not necessarily the whole kitchen sink. It's just you grab the bits you want out of everything connecting together. So I see it coming fast.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
The question was, are any of us working with the state of California to improve the efficiency of water adoption? And no, we're not.
But I am. We are. Oh. Okay. Why don't we? So one of the things we're doing, I don't want to take away time from the panel, but real quick, one of the key areas to save water by the high-value growers that are in California is to essentially do the interoperability issue. The growers need all the data in context, and so we provide that on our platform. And I can take that offline with you in more detail. I really don't want to take time away from the panel. Ma'am, there was somebody there who had a question? Are we done with the time? Okay, I guess we're done with the time. All right, guys, thanks so much for attending. Please give a big hand for our panelists.